It is noon in the East and 9 a.m. in the West, and this is your Monday edition of Lunch with Lincoln. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had a healthy and happy weekend.
Yes.
I am your host for today, Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Joining me today is the inimitable, the one and only Maya May. Maya, welcome.
What's up, Reed? Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, thank you. And Maya hosts our Wednesday night show. We're speaking 7 p.m.
I would be terrible if it were at 7 a.m. I don't think I could handle that.
On the West Coast would be a hard time. But Maya, thanks for coming today. So guys, we want to take your questions today. I want to say thank you to everybody who submitted them. We'll get to as many as we can. But Maya, right before we went on, you told me that you had asked the folks on your Instagram feed, what are you worried about? What are you seeing out there? What are you feeling? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were putting it in the context of the political situation, the political environment in this country. Right. But what did your folks, what did the folks respond to you with?
Yeah, so I realized that because a lot of us live this 24/7 and are immersed in it, we sometimes think that everyone else is too. And so I put that question out there like, hey, are y'all worried? Are you concerned? Because I know a lot of you don't actually follow this stuff closely. And what I got back, other than the people who follow me because of the Lincoln Project, right, what I got back was, no, not really paying attention. And it kind of shocked me because what I realized is everybody is so into their own lives right now, right? They're just trying to get through a pandemic. They weren't expecting it to go into year 3. And right, so there's this idea that everything will take care of itself. Everything will be okay, because for the most part, it always has been. Like, democracy has always, for the most part, functioned for my generation. And so in their minds, there's not this urgency because they think the politicians will take care of it. The people that they elected should take care of it. And that to me is, I'm like, no, you can't outsource democracy right now. This is a thing where it's like almost like our lack of civic engagement has caught up with us. And that's why things are starting to fall apart. And it's like, no, we have to actively be engaged, understand the election process, volunteer for boards, things like that. So I don't know. We got to get people to pay attention to what's going on.
Well, no, I think that's right. I mean, the other part too is that in a functioning democracy, or I should say, in a Republican form of government, like we have, small r Republican form of government, we elect people to represent us, and we expect that they will represent our best interests, in our area, whether or not it's a legislative district, whether or not it's a school board, whether or not it's Congress or even the President of the United States. And what we see now is that, a lot of Americans, let's be clear, we've all taken it for granted, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to get to your thing about, people are tuned out. But, we have taken it for granted so long. We've been given this gift, right, which is self-determination. But the responsibility that comes along with that sometimes is too much to bear, which is you have to be informed. You have to pay attention. You have to care about your community and the things that happen in it, as opposed to just being the victim of whatever happens to you. Now, look, a global pandemic happens, right? I don't know if it's the guy that ate the bat or what else happened, right? At this point, where it came from, somewhere in China, is immaterial, because you're right. We're back to year 3. We're on to year 3 here. And I think it's also reminded the world, but I think especially Americans, of the arbitrary nature of life, which Americans, of course, don't believe in, because we think we're all going to live forever, right? And so, now it's like, well, I used to be able to do everything I wanted to do without a second thought, right? Pack the kids off to school, went to the grocery store, got on a plane. All of that stuff now has this amount, significant amount of friction in it, right? Do I have to wear a mask? Have I been vaccinated? If I go to this function, whether or not it's a family function, friends, am I going to get sick? Is Omicron, as bad as Delta? All of these things that we have never, in the last century had to take, stock of, right? And, we talked about, SARS, the swine flu, which I had, which, believe me, for 10 days, that was a miserable experience, right? H1N1 or whatever it was. But those were relatively small, contained pockets of people who got sick, even less people that died. Now it's, well, this could happen to me. Because, it's like, when I don't know how many people die in car wrecks every day, but it's a lot. It's more than it should be. But it's always the other guy, right? You feel like you're behind the wheel and you have some modicum of control, right? This doesn't give you any sense of control. We're in the first place now where, school's not right. Your social life isn't right. Your family, look, my parents haven't seen my older daughter in 2 years, 2+ years, and it might be another year before they see her. And at the age our kids are, the difference between 9 and 12 is all the difference in the world. It's
like a lifetime. And the thing is, our lives before mostly functioned on autopilot because of stability. We had a stable country that we probably took for granted. And so we didn't have to make those decisions on a daily basis of the mask, to your point, should I do this? Should I do that? And we all know there's decision fatigue. That is actually draining and emotionally taxing. So when people elect these representatives and they think that that's it, like you vote, you get them in office, and then that's it. No, that's not it. You have to stay engaged after they're elected to ensure that they're representing the interests. And I think that's what happens now. We've got like Congress people gone wild because we don't have people actively engaged in the process because their brains are right now, quite frankly, being used up to do a lot of things that before they didn't have to do. But we should have adapted by now. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah, there's a guy on named Tom Nichols who is a big supporter of ours, and we've had him on several shows. I've had him on the podcast, and he said we're all sort of just overgrown children, right? we just don't want to accept that this is how the world is now, at least for the time being. And so, we're petulant about it writ large. And look, we all get frustrated by it, right? Oh, well, I was going to see, the family for Christmas, that all got messed up because this person's got that thing and that person can't get a test and yada, yada, yada. And we're 10,000 years away from being hunters and gatherers, right? But to your point about adaptation, we don't seem to be handling it very well. But I do want to say one thing too about what you said about, we elect these people, we want them to take care of it. Yes. With, again, the added responsibility and the codicil that still means you have to pay attention so that you can understand how good or bad a job these people are doing when they express themselves. And I will say this, many elected Republicans, as you noted, now tell you what they believe in, which is almost nothing, right? It's a pretty, shocking nihilism that they're willing to express publicly on a daily basis. But this also represents, between the frustration, the petulance, and the I don't want to deal with it, I'm going to close my eyes and close my ears piece, this is where the slide towards autocracy or authoritarianism happens, because as you said before we went on the air, I just want someone else to take care of it.
Right.
And the question, Maya, is what are people willing to trade for that stability that you talked about, right? As Eisenhower said, you are safe and secure inside a jail cell and you'll get 3 meals a day, but you're still in a jail cell, right? It's not freedom. People tell you what to do. They tell you where to go. They tell you when to eat and when to sleep and everything else. You're secure, but you're not free, right? And so this is one of those things where Americans, I think, in particular, now have to wake up and say, like, what is it that I'm willing to put up with? What is it I'm willing to give away?
Right.
And I think you're absolutely right, is that a lot of your friends, a lot of my friends, right? I never bring up politics unless somebody else wants to talk about it, right? Because the last thing in the world I want to do is spend more time talking about it. But, that's the thing is, they ask questions. I'm happy to answer it. I'm going to have a perspective, right? I am not a nonpartisan individual. I have a very partisan point of view. And they readily accept that most of the time. And a lot of them agree with me. But the frustration is real. We see it with schools. Again, we see it with doctors. We see it with hospitals. And so I think that it is one of those things that, everybody wants it to go away, but the only way to make the noise stop is by, individuals getting up and turning the stereo down themselves, right?
Exactly.
This work by remote control.
And that's how true adaptation works, right? Is when an organism is stressed, it's either going to freeze up and do nothing and die, or it's going to adapt. And so if we don't turn down the volume and pay attention to what's really going on and look at the bigger picture, because I think right now everything's so myopic. Once we look at the bigger picture, which we're going to get to these questions because they're really good and they actually address a lot of what we're talking about. So I think we're...
Well, and thank God for Maya being here, because otherwise I would have wandered down the Primrose Trail here for as long as we could have. So, all right. So B, why don't we put up our first question here? And it says, Moto Writer on Twitter asks Maya, is the current federal Republican Party too far gone now to salvage into a unified movement of progressive conservatives and libertarians?
Yes.
Well, let me take this as the vestigial Republican in the room. I think the answer is yes. First, I don't know what a progressive conservative is. I think I have an idea. It would be sort of like a Rockefeller, even maybe a John McCain at this point. And libertarians, I think the issue with listen, I flirted with libertarianism. I think every American has a streak of that because we all want to be left to our own devices. But the truth is, libertarianism is not a governing ethos. If you're a group of people who believe that stop signs are overarching, autocracy, then that's not the basis of a society. That's just like, I want to do whatever it is I want to do, and I don't care what anybody else thinks about it, which is a big streak in the current Republican Party. I think that it needs to be defeated. You can have remember, the Republican Party is no longer conservative, right? It's not a conservative party anymore. It is a radical authoritarian party. Whatever conservatism means, it's not included in this. And I had a guy named Norm Ornstein, who's an expert on government politics, an old friend of my dad's, old friend of mine, who said, parties to change dramatically need to lose 3 straight elections. If we want a Republican Party back that represents a center-right conservative view of the world, then they got to lose in 22, they got to lose in 24, and they got to lose in 26, because otherwise there will be no reason for the people who are currently the performative crazies to change their minds, and no reasons for voters to go looking for something else. But Maya, I'd love, as someone who doesn't, carry the baggage of the GOP on their back every day, I would love to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that the current GOP has to decide for themselves, and they've already made the decision. Like, I think they staked their reputation on a person that they absolutely should not have. And I think they walked back themselves into a corner on this one, because basically now all they do is represent this kind of sensationalist, almost like a reality show. Like, sure. I see the people that they push forward, like, the kid whose name for some reason is escaping me, who murdered people and now is like...
Oh, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Kyle Rittenhouse, yes. Like, people like that, it's almost like everybody's an Omarosa now in the Republican Party. And I think once you've gone that far in that direction, there is no more seriousness left. And so you're not going to have enough serious people follow the GOP, and to the point where it's going to make it possible for them to ever govern. Like, nobody will ever take them seriously ever again. Look at the people they've put forth as being exemplary of who they are. So no, done, over.
But I think also this is another point too, which is they have no interest in governing. They have an interest in power. Right. They have an interest in self-enrichment and self-aggrandizement that makes them a gang, not a political party. And if and when they take significant power at the federal level, whether or not it's the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, or God forbid, the White House, they will act like a gang. Gangsterism will be part of it, right? It will be a totally corrupt system. Mm-hmm. Payoffs will be the order of the day. People who pay the VIG will get to operate. People that don't will get shut down. There's plenty of history that shows this, and we even saw it. We even got a pretty good taste of it while Trump was in office. Right. He was a singularly corrupt individual, which he always has been. But singularly corrupt individuals surround themselves with other corrupt individuals, because for the most part, those are the only people who are willing to be around that kind of ugliness for any extended period of time.
And they're also not interested in investing in any kind of progress that actually would make America great again. Like, right. That's the thing. They're not interested in investing in green energy. Like, look at what the rest of the world is doing and look what we're doing. And so they're always impeding progress. And so if we actually truly want to, again, it's that adaptation response as a country. We absolutely need to adapt and evolve, which means investment in education, which means investment in our infrastructure. And these are the same things that they're just getting in the way of.
All right, B, let's go to the next one. Thank you, Moto Writer. All right, at delgrosso.bill on Instagram says, give us 3 things that people can do to stop this slide towards autocracy. Bill, thanks for the question. First and foremost, I would say, and Maya, I'll give one and you give one, and we'll back and forth here. We give more than 3. One is, I think, you can join groups like the Lincoln Project, lincolnproject.us, where you can find out how to get involved in the broader pro-democracy movement. We'll have a lot more news on that in coming days. If you live in a particular state, you can get involved with your state party if you're a Democrat. If there's a particular candidate you like, whether or not that's for U.S. Congress, state legislature, school board, county council, city council, get involved. I think another thing is also get involved in the mechanics of elections.
Yes.
Serve as an election judge, serve as a poll watcher, serve as someone who is going to help be part of the machinery that is going to ensure that every vote is going to be counted next November freely and fairly. Because all of this stuff comes down to those people who really do believe, I think the vast majority, even today, take that as a solemn and sacred duty that they are responsible for counting Americans' votes. Maya, what about you?
Yeah, I was actually going to add to that, and I made a video over the weekend because after I listened to the Lincoln Project podcast, and I believe it was Joe Trippi. Yes, everybody, if you're not listening, it's seriously a masterclass in political strategy and understanding what's happening right now in this moment, but also with a historical framework. So you absolutely must listen regularly. But at the end of it, I was like, okay, election boards, like we need to know what's going on with our election boards. And then I realized most people don't even know where to find that information. Right. And we're not gonna, we barely have time to figure out what's for dinner every night. Like every time my kid asks me what's for dinner, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, we had chicken last night. Right? It's stressful. So the last thing I'm gonna do is sit down on my computer and start to do this kind of research. And so I was like, well, let me do that research real quick. And I just how to find your state's election board. And I made a quick little video. And so I'm going to be posting more of these because truly it's like you Google it, you find it in your state, and you can just start reading and educating yourself. And I think what's the problem is nobody really knows where to go for the resources, making it more difficult to engage in the process because it's not something that's taught in schools, and it should be.
No, I think that's right. I mean, civic education in this country, in public schools in particular, has been, it's gone the way of wood shop, metal shop, home ec, art, right? I mean, it's all gone, in the name of whatever it is we think we need to do education-wise these days. And I think, we're gonna take Maya's videos and we'll post them to the Lincoln Project outlets because Maya is far more compelling on any given day than I am, thank God. All right, let's take our next question, B. All right, Emily Jane 429 on Instagram says, what's the best literature to convert Trump supporting family members? Well,
the Bible.
There's the Bible. You might have heard of it. I have a stack of books over here on my desk and another one behind me and another one to my right that my wife is really upset about. There's any number of things that you can read. I would say that, giving them a book, I would say, where's my On Tyranny here? 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder, I think is a perfect book. It's 126 pages. It's a very easy read. The Twilight of Democracy by Anne Applebaum.
Yes, that's a good one.
Again, another quick read that I think are very, very good at distilling otherwise, broad historical trends in what we're seeing today. And so that would be my 2 choices. Maya, what about you?
So I think right now we are far more emotional than we are rational people. Sure. And so trying to lead with facts, these are facts that people don't want to hear. And so I will read that book and go, yes, this is how I could explain it. But that's not really what people are going to hear, because as a matter of fact, when people hear facts that contradict what they believe and their values, they're actually more likely to push back on those facts. And so what I recommend is actually understanding human psychology and trying to understand how to talk to somebody in a way that is empathetic. Even if you don't agree with what they're saying, you don't have to agree with them. Your goal is to actually understand understand what is it going on in their personal life, and they're your friends and family members. So you should know this is a way of getting close to them, really calling them in as opposed to calling them out, right? And having a better understanding of like, oh, like, okay, so you value this and you think that Trump is going to give you that, whatever that thing is, right? And so having to understand what it is. And this is a book I actually am reading. It's called Persuasion, How to Convince People When Facts Don't Matter. And it's incredibly helpful. It actually gives like steps that you can actually use to kind of understand where people are coming from. And it's not easy, let me tell you, because every time I try to have a conversation with somebody like this, it's almost like sometimes like, it's like, the sky's blue, can't you just see it? Right. We want to scream like, can't you just see the facts? But facts don't matter as much.
Well, I would say a couple of things. One is that we have to remember that, well, first of all decisions are emotional, right? And we wrap rationality around them to help us make sense in our own heads. But also we need to think about this is we're past politics and we're into belief. Mm-hmm. And so if you believe the things that Donald Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson say, you have already factored in and factored out the rationality of it because you want to believe it.
Right.
It's just like to your point about if you are a devout Catholic, and someone walks up to you and goes, there is no God, you're an idiot, are you more likely to believe them or less? Exactly. The answer is less. They'll tell you to leave them alone, and they may go back to church and double down on their devotion because to believe that your devotion is unwarranted is probably a break that people just don't want to make. Mm-hmm. And I get that. From a belief perspective. And I think the other thing is we have friends of the Lincoln Project like Dr. Stephen Hassan or Nick Carmody who understand, Hassan was in a cult. He was in the Moonies when he was a kid. Carmody has a really good understanding of the psychology of these things. And I think the tough part too, Maya, is one, being willing to lower your own walls to have those conversations, but two, understand that they have to be individual and it's almost impossible to get the whole idea to scale. Right. You can't do it on a mass level. It's got to be almost one by one.
Yeah. And that's what's difficult. And I remember hearing this on the podcast as well, is this idea that, Fox is at scale spreading misinformation. Right. And then we're trying to have these one-on-one individual conversations. Now, I do think psychologically people do look to authority figures to help counteract. So I think we can scale it that way in the sense that if people that they truly believe and trust, like pastors, preachers, can change their tune. And so maybe that's what we need to do is reach those people who can, on an aggregate level, reach many people. And I think there's an opening right now that didn't exist before. And I think when Trump had that interview with Candace Owens and mentioned that vaccines do work and that the booster, I think he even mentioned the booster, I think for a lot of Trump supporters who were anti-vax, I think that really just kind of threw them for a loop. So I think seizing on those kind of opportunities and opening up a conversation that way and saying, hey, what do you think about that? He was anti-vax, it seemed, and now he's pro-vax. And, is that confusing? To create that kind of cognitive dissonance, it might create enough of an opening to kind of make them realize that they're just being, fooled.
No, I think you're right. And I think it is that dissonance. And we saw that a year ago with January 6th, right? Those windows open, but they don't stay open for very long. No, they close quickly, and then the rationalizations begin in a big, big hurry.
Yeah, it's like landing a shuttle. Yeah, the space shuttle.
Right, exactly. Right. You've got this point where you can land on the runway or you burn up in the atmosphere. There's only two choices. All right. B, let's go to our next question. All right. C. Sassenbach. Or Sansabach, on Instagram says, has the media overanalyzation of J6 numbed people to the severity of the current threat? What I would say is that the media's analysis of it is late, and there still tends to be, I don't want to say that tends to be, there is still an idea that there must be two sides to this, that there's some equivalency between what pro-democracy forces and the people who, not only the individuals who stormed the Capitol that day, but the people like Donald Trump who encouraged them somehow deserve equal validity. in mainstream news reporting. I think that's a big concern of mine. I don't think it's numbed people to the severity, because I don't think, to Maya's earlier point when we started, that a lot of people have understood the severity of it to begin with. There are surveys out there that show 60% of self-identified Republicans believe that there's a threat to democracy in the form of people like Joe Biden and Democrats, whereas only 34% of Democrats, self-identified Democrats, believe there's a threat to democracy. So, you know, we're upside down on this, Maya, which is the people who should believe that it's a threat don't, and the people who do believe it's a threat think that, but for the wrong reason.
Yeah, I think there's this idea that it was a one-time thing, and I think we take for granted that people are watching the same news sources or even watching news at all.
Right.
You know, because news has to compete with a lot of things right now. TikTok, Instagram. People are getting their information from all different sources, and this seeing over and over again the attack on the Capitol, in a way, people see it, and they incorporate it. Like, remember when school shootings used to be incredibly jarring, like, and it was just like, and now when I think about school shootings or even shootings in general, like, was it at Mandalay Bay? That was only like, what, 3-4 years ago?
Right.
That maybe like 300, 400 people were taken out. And the human ability to kind of just go like, oh, that's a thing that happens now.
Right.
And then to just kind of scoot over. But that's the concern for me. So I don't think it's the media overanalyzation. I think it's the saturation of watching violent videos in our culture. Like, it's just kind of a part of our culture now to see it and unfortunately accept it. And
Right.
so I think we have to go one step further every time we talk about these videos, see these videos, and say, do we want this to be commonplace? Because it feels normalized now. And we have to keep calling it out and saying, this is not how we want to evolve as a culture. We don't want political violence to become the standard, to be the norm, to be accepted, to be even expected, because a lot of people are just expecting it now.
Right. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I remember exactly where I was when Columbine happened. It's one of those, you know, everybody has those moments in their life where they knew exactly where they was. And Columbine for me is one of those. I remember exactly the desk I was sitting in, the building in Austin, Texas I was sitting in. But, you know, I do want to say this about the severity of the current threat. Last week, on the anniversary of January 6th, President Biden gave what I think is the best speech of his presidency so far. And I think it was a speech that probably needed an anniversary like January 6th to fly, but we created an ad that highlights the things that he was talking about. So B, why don't we go ahead and roll that?
Fellow Americans, 1 year ago today, democracy was attacked. Those who stormed this Capitol and those who called on them to do so held a dagger at the throat of America. They want to rule, or they will ruin. Ruin what our country fought for at Lexington and Concord, at Gettysburg and Omaha Beach, Seneca Falls, Selma, Alabama. The right to vote, the right to govern ourselves, the right to determine our own destiny. You can't love your country only when you win. This is not a land of kings or dictators or autocrats, so we have to be firm, resolute, and unyielding in our defense of the right to vote and to have that vote counted. I will stand in this breach. I will defend this nation, because we have a shared belief in democracy. Anything is possible. Anything. God bless you all. May God bless those who stand watch over democracy.
So Maya, I mean, I think that was an important message. I think it was an important statement for President Biden to make. He's headed to Georgia this week to give another speech on voting rights. And so I think that this is one of those things where for the Democratic Party, it was important to hear the leader of the party say this. And I think it was also important for Democrats, especially the President of the United States, to start invoking imagery of American patriotism, which, as we saw,
what true patriotism is. True patriotism.
What true patriotism is. Right. Democrats have a real hard time with patriotism. They have a hard time with things like the American flag. Because there's, you know, they go back to sort of the original sin of the founding, and which should never be ignored, should not be denied, and should be faced and dealt with. But that also means that they often leave many Americans sort of cold, because most Americans think about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the Mount Rushmore. And so I thought this was an important part for Joe Biden to play in crossing that sort of chasm between what it means to be American and what it means to be pro-democracy.
Yeah, listening to the speech originally, and I listened to it with my daughter. And by the way, I asked this question on Twitter. It seems like it wasn't really shown in schools, and schools didn't really talk about it all too much. I encourage you, if your child has not seen the speech, to watch the speech and discuss it, because this is our moment. This is an incredible opportunity. Like, it's like in Hamilton when they're like, we're so lucky to be alive right now, when they sing that. I feel incredibly grateful to be alive in this moment where we can actually get actively engaged in democracy again, as with friends, with family. And so I think it's like so incredibly important that we focus on these things. Is that democracy calling? I think it's calling me. I thought it was calling.
Democracy calls all of us, whether we want it to or not.
I was like, democracy's calling Reed in the middle of this very emphatic speech. No, it's calling me. But in all seriousness, folks, like, this is really, truly our opportunity to stand up and say, no, we are Americans. We are patriots because we believe in the democratic process. And that means voting and following what our politicians do after we vote for them. That's
yeah, listen, guys. Well, as we close out today, indulge me from an old movie, Patton, starring George C. Scott. And he's giving this grand speech to his troops. And he says, and you won't have to say to your grandson, you know, Granddad, what did you do in the Great World War II? You won't have to say, well, son, I shoveled shit in Louisiana. And that's the case, gang. You have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to do something very rare, very special, and absolutely essential, which is help secure and defend American democracy for my kids, for Maya's kids, and our grandkids, and for generations to come. Listen, Maya, I want to thank you for joining me today. I want to thank everybody out there for joining us. You'll have a guest host on Friday. I'm going to take the day. But I hope that everybody has a great, safe, healthy week out there. We look forward to hearing from you again, and we will see you next time.
All right. Bye.